Hey Dream Theater fans, you like songs like The Answer Lies Within, Wither, Disappear, Lifting Shadows Off a Dream, Hollow, The Looking Glass? Well, congratulations, Dream Theater has made a 2-hour album of just that for you. Now, before any Dream Theater fanboys and fangirls fucking come at me to gut me to death, now this is my opinion. Now, I've seen a ton, especially Dream Theater fans, that keep harping, this is the best album ever, fucking anyone who doesn't agree, you're not a real fan. Now, I fucking love Dream Theater, okay? They're one of my favorite bands, probably was my personal favorite band, until this album came out, which just kind of fucked my brain with a sort of boredom. But this is me telling you guys how I feel of this album and how I feel you guys should spend your money or if people should support this album. And I think even if a band that you really like, if they put out a piece of shit, even if you really like them, I think if you hate it, then you should voice your opinion to say don't do this again and do something better, basically. And the whole stance of you're not a real fan if you don't like everything they put out, that's not true. That's called being a fanboy or fangirl, and that's being stupid. The thing is, I mean, it is my opinion, but I'm going to argue that this album sucks based on factual stuff. And this whole point of this review is I'm trying to warn people not to buy it, if they have a certain mindset, that is. Now, do I think this album is worth $20 because it is a double album, 2 hours? Hell no. Do I think it's worth $10? Hell no. I think the amount of decent music on it is equivalent to maybe a little bit less than a fourth of the music on the album. Now, I was actually sort of interested with this idea of having a big epic rock opera, and I think that they could have done it right, but the problem is not the rock opera. It's not the epicness of anything, because this album is epic. I mean, I'll agree in that. But the problem is the songwriting. Everything feels generic and drawn out, like they just wrote some generic shit to write a bunch of fucking songs instead of putting any effort in anything. Even the best songs off this album aren't that great. I mean, there's just one that's absolutely the best song off the whole thing, and that's like one of the only 2 songs of this whole album that's metal or prog. I mean, it's an epic rock opera, which I guess is sort of prog, kind of like The Wall or The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, but most of his ballads are like bizarre Broadway show tunes, you know, like and all this weird bullshit with like symphonic stuff. Now, this album has a huge epic story that is pretty decent and has to do with like a dystopian world of like futuristic shit, and they only allow music through like robots and stuff. And they have this big revolution and try to fight the Lord Nefarious or something, which is the stupidest villain name ever. Now let's talk about the members. The most glaring issue with a member on this album, other than the fact that once again, just like any other Dream Theater album of late, you can't fucking hear John Mayung at all or have any bass features from him for some reason, is Mike Mangini. Now, I like Portnoy more. I'm going to admit that now. A lot of fans could be like, fucking, he hates fucking Mike Mangini because he wants to suck Portnoy's balls all day long. No. Okay, I was open with Mike Mangini, like open to like him and stuff, alright? I liked his performance a lot in Dramatic Turn of Events, but the problem I found there, and the problem that's with a lot of this, is that he plays it too safe. He's not super creative and has a lot of awesome drum fills like he did on all Mike Portnoy albums, you know. Mike Mangini just kind of does some of the more normal stuff that Mike Portnoy had done throughout the album, like time changes and stuff, but it's not that noticeable. But then when you come to this album, the chug fest is unbelievable. Every song, of course, is like a ballad, but his drumming is even bad for that, and his drum tone is horrendous. It sounds like a fucking drum machine. And I'm not trying to be like the idiot that's like, he sounds robotic, he plays robotic. I'm arguing that he's not even that interesting of a drummer. He's not exciting. He can just play Portnoy stuff, but he can't be creative like Portnoy. Which is another glaring issue of why this album came to be. See, with Dramatic Turn of Events, they kind of put out an album that felt like Portnoy was still in the band. But then afterwards, they started to strip away all the stuff that Portnoy had added. And a lot of fans are like, yes, get rid of the fucking Portnoyness. But, you know, he was the one that saved the band, right? He was the one that always wanted to keep him in a metal and prog direction, right? I mean, if you watch the Score So Far documentary, they were being driven into like commercial shit during the Falling into Infinity era, and Petrucci didn't really care either way. He was just like, whatever, I'll make music or what. Like, he didn't care what music he made as long as it sold. And Mike Portnoy was just like, no, we're gonna fucking make a progressive metal epic album. Everyone's gonna leave us alone, and we're gonna make an album like Images and Words that everyone will love. And he fought for this band. Mike Portnoy fought and gave more of a shit for Dream Theater than John Petrucci or John Mayung or even fucking James LaBrie has ever done. And another big problem with this album, on the same lines of John Petrucci, is there's not even a single fucking memorable riff on this whole thing. I mean, maybe there's a couple moments here and there. There's like nothing really cool and great that you can latch onto, maybe except for that one song, A New Beginning, which is easily the highlight, or maybe that one song, The Moment of Betrayal. But other than that, it's just ballads where Jordan Rudess is just playing keyboard like crazy. So if you wanted metal, you're not going to get much of it here. If you wanted prog, you're not going to get much of it here. And if you wanted technical playing, you're not going to get much of it here. This album is hardly Dream Theater. But the big problem with that is when it culminates together, this whole album just sounds like a Disney movie.
This is what still gives me nightmares.
And funnily enough, probably the best thing about the whole album is that James LaBrie sings like 90% of the whole album, when before he was always put in the back. And he does a pretty dang good performance. He hasn't sounded this good in years. And the biggest problem with this album, musically, is that they're going for a direction, like a formula, that already kind of sucks, like this big overbloated concept album with way too many songs, allowing room for way too much filler, and they play it terribly. They don't even make it like a rock opera, they just make it ballads and stuff. With a lot of epic concept albums and stuff, you'll see that the band added the concept later on, that they focused first on the music and writing a dang good song, and then added some bizarre storytelling lyrics. But a lot of albums like Operation Mindcrime, or The Wall, or The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, a lot of the stuff was, most of the best songs on these albums, that is, a lot of these great ideas, were written first, musically, and then they added stories to them, and it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel like Broadway bullshit. But with this album and some other albums like Operation Mindcrime 2, the lyrics are written first, and you can really tell because the music is generic behind it and it's just trying to be epic and like, oh, moody, but the songs have absolutely no strength because of it. Which proves just because it's an epic opus of 34 songs in 2 fucking hours of like a crazy story doesn't mean that it's a great album musically. It just means it's epic. And even Scenes from a Memory, which was awesome, kind of dragged at the end, especially with stuff like Through Her Eyes. So even at 70 minutes, that album sort of drags a tiny bit towards the end. But how about this one that's fucking twice the length of that, with not even nearly as good of music? And I think because the songs don't have any sort of like oomph to them, and a lot of them are very generic and unmemorable, that this album will age horrendously. And then when you get to the fucking second album, you're like, geez, there's still more to this? After half of it, you're still fucking bored.
It's time to stop. It's time to stop, okay? No more.
And the second half of the album is worse. I mean, you could argue, ballads, I love them or whatever, so you'll like or hate this album. But there's even some songs in here that are just downright terrible, especially on some stuff on the second side that just has some ridiculously cheesy vocal delivery and terrible riffs. Then we have the second horrible side of the album for the most part. All the good is at the beginning. You have another overture that sounds kind of weird, but this is the overture for the second half. And it's shorter, and it's definitely just as epic as the first overture. But I just wish it was a little bit longer and stuff and had more cool ideas. Then we have Moment of Betrayal, which is actually pretty cool. It's pretty heavy. The vocal melodies in the chorus are really great, and the verse is pretty cool. It sounds really epic and cool. It feels like good old Dream Theater. The only part I don't like is when it's like in the pre-chorus where James is saying, "You're acting very strange." That part just seems really bizarre, but the rest of it's awesome. Heaven's Cove, it gets like heavier towards the end, but it just feels stupid. Begin Again is another generic ballad. The Path That Divides Us is more generic crap that I did not like. This is where the album starts to get really terrible. The Walking Shadows, one of the absolute worst songs of the album, has nothing good to it. It's more fucking irritating dog shit. My Last Farewell is a generic ballad. I think this one also has the "Brother, Can You Hear Me" type of shit again. Losing Faith is kind of a reprise of the other song from the first side that has to do with Faith, who's a character. I think Faith gets killed or something like that. It definitely feels kind of cool, but the intro's way too long, and it's more slow, ballady type of shit, but it does feel kind of sad. Whispers on the Wind is generic, boring, and it feels like it's a drawn-out section of the story that doesn't need to get drawn out. Hymn of a Thousand Voices definitely has a cool song title, but it's more boring, generic balladry. Our New World. Now this is where they just start fucking with you, because it's like it already sounds like Disney music, and then they have a song called Our New World, you know, a whole new world, and they just start fucking with you, because this is the most Disney sounding song off the whole goddamn thing. It just makes me want to start singing the whole new world in the chorus. Then we finally get to the ass end of this over-bloated punk of dog shit. The title track, and you think, yes, they're going to end it cool, they're going to end it epic, but guess how they end it? With a fucking generic ballad. So that's the over-bloated 34 track Astonishing. I skipped all the Jordan Rudess sound effects songs, which are just pointless and terrible. And I just want to leave you with this. My friend, who I talk to a lot about metal and music and stuff, he does not like Dream Theater. So he has no bias towards any album that comes out from them where it's like, oh my god, because it's a new album from them, I love it. He has no bias. I was telling him about this album and how I felt when I heard it, and just all the information about it, just factual stuff, not necessarily just, it's fucking terrible, it's generic, and blah, blah, blah. I was just saying, you know, it's ballads for the most part. A lot of it kind of sounds like Disney music. It's 34 songs, 2 hours, and he listened to some of it and he's like, this is just fucking terrible as well. He hated it, and he heard the singles, which are like some of the best songs on there, and he said this, a guy who doesn't even like Dream Theater but knows a little bit about them, that they should just get that Mike Portnoy guy back and play some good shit that they're, you know, like the stuff that they're actually good at doing, heavy metal and prog.